Casey Bowser is archivist for the Sisters of Charity of Seton Hill and University Archivist for Seton Hill University. Currently, she also serves as president of the Archivist for Congregations of Women Religious, ACWR. This is a national organization that assists lay and religious archives in the management, interpretation, and preservation of the archives of Catholic sisters and nuns in the U.S. and worldwide. Casey's president of this. In addition to this, she's a member of the Mission and Heritage Committee for the Seton Heritage Ministries, and she serves on the Council of Library and Information Resources as a grant reviewer. She also serves as an adjunct in the History Department at St. Vincent's College. And she is co-author of Sisters of Charity of Seton Hill, a 2019 pictorial history of the congregation. Casey earned her BA in Public History at St. Vincent's College. She earned her MA in Museum Studies from Johns Hopkins University. She earned her Certified Archivist credentials in 2019. Prior to working in the archives, Casey worked at Westmoreland Museum of American Art in Greensburg, PA. Her topic today is Gates of an Era, Open Doors and New Beginnings for Catholic Archives. Casey.
Thank you, Sister Sally. First, I have to explain the title of my talk, Gates of an Era. It comes from a quote attributed to the foundress of the Sisters of Charity of Seton Hill, Mother Aloysia Lowe, when she built the new Mother House and Academy in Greensburg in 1889. It says, "I opened not merely the doors of this house, I swung the gates of an era." We are standing right now at the gates of a new era for Catholic archives in the United States. Catholic archives, whether diocesan, men's, or women's religious communities, or even parish collections, are unique in the world of archives. They are akin to corporate or institutional collections, where the internal departments and functions of those departments often delineate what is preserved. But by their nature, Catholic archives are also community archives. They are little c Catholic, all-encompassing, inclusive, broad. These archives contain the histories of underrepresented peoples, the Catholic Church, women's history, regional history, and reveal the growth of education, healthcare, social service, and much more. However, these collections are at imminent risk of loss without long-term strategic planning. Who is ultimately responsible for Catholic archives, and why is this a new era? We must first consider what canon law tells us about Catholic archives. In the case of the diocese, the chancellor's responsibility is to take care that the acts of the curia are gathered, arranged, and safeguarded in the archive, and to ensure that all documents which regard the diocese or parishes must be protected with the greatest care. The code goes on to explain that every diocese should have archive storage. This is not the case. And that an inventory or catalog should be kept. That is also not always the case. Additionally, a diocesan bishop is noted to take care that the acts and documents of the archives of cathedrals, collegiate institutions, parochial institutions, and other churches are also diligently preserved with accompanying inventories. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to read the circular letters from the Pontifical Commission for the Cultural Patrimony of the Church. The 1997 letter, called The Pastoral Formation of Church Archives, reviews the importance of archives for the Catholic Church in transmitting tradition, promoting evangelization, and serving as a pastoral tool. The 2006 letter urged major superiors of institutes of consecrated and apostolic life to inventory and adequately care for their cultural patrimony. One section of the 97 letter emphasizes the following: good management of historic archives, the protection and conservation of the secret archives, which diocesan archives are meant to have, the correct organization of archives for current affairs, and adequate computerization of data, the employment of qualified personnel, and the assistance of technical experts. Participation in national and international archive associations, the promotion of the availability of this material for consultation and research. The circular also stresses cooperation with civil bodies for the archives to become a universal destination. It says archives, as part of the cultural heritage, should be offered primarily at the service of the community that has produced them, but in time, they assume a universal destination because they become the heritage of all humanity. The material stored cannot, in fact, be precluded to those who can take advantage of it. Those responsible must make sure that the use of church archives be facilitated further. That is not only to those interested who have the right to access, but also to a larger range of researchers without prejudice toward their religious or ideological backgrounds. Such an attitude of disinterested openness, kind welcome, and competent service must be taken into careful consideration so that the historical memory of the church may be offered to the entire society. The church, its various religious orders, Catholic colleges and universities, parish leadership, all bear this responsibility. As President for Archivists of Congregations of Women Religious, ACWR, a 30-year-old professional organization which assists lay and religious archivists in the management, interpretation, and preservation of the records of Catholic sisters and nuns in the US and worldwide, I've been lucky enough to be a part of national conversations about the future of women religious archives. These conversations, though, are long overdue. According to Leadership for Congregations of Women Religious, roughly 80% of the more than 400 women religious congregations in the US will face a major merger, transition, or complete closure in the next 20 years. A 75% decline in the number of women religious over the past 60 years, and the average age of a sister hovering around 80, are all signs that change is nigh. While hard decisions have been made and will be made about buildings, ministries, and the needs of aging communities, the archives sit and wait patiently for a sustainable future, a permanent home. Now take this same scenario and apply it to parishes that are closing and merging, dioceses dealing with properties and finances, men's religious communities also facing major change. This could be the makings of a great crisis for Catholic history and heritage. However, I see it as an opportunity to establish new relationships, to teach non-Catholics about the church, to assess our past, to better plan our future, to highlight hidden history, and to preserve charism and legacy for decades to come. The gates are beginning to open. In 2018, Boston College hosted Envisioning the Future of Catholic Archives, a working conference to spark discussion about sustaining all Catholic archives. Archivists, religious leaders, and scholars gathered to discuss their concerns for the future, just like we are gathering here today. The conference further prompted national efforts for Catholic archives, but admittedly, much of this work has been delayed by the pandemic. At present, ACWR is working with several partners and the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate to develop a national survey of women religious archives. Our hope is the survey will help us identify the needs of women religious archivists and assess the current state of the field. We will use the results to spearhead new programs and evaluate old ones. The project could also serve as a template for other kinds of religious archive surveys, including that for men religious. It's worth noting that there is no equivalent professional organization for men religious archivists or archives, besides the diocesan. In addition, a consortium of Catholic higher ed repositories and independent regional Catholic archives are working to develop a national network to support Catholic archives in transition. There are several regional collaborative archives in the works. The Women Religious Archives Collaborative is being led by religious leaders and archivists in the Cleveland area. The Heritage and Research Center at St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana, has roughly 12 different local congregations contracted to combine their archives. There are discussions to have a similar model in the Chicago area. However, there are no currently fully functioning collaborative Catholic repositories for women religious, besides charism-based repositories, which I will get to in a moment. All are still in development, as these negotiations, conversations, fundraising, and planning take years. Academic institutions like Notre Dame, Catholic U, Santa Clara University, among others, have been accepting all or part of women religious collections for several years. Boston College is still in the formative stages of planning a Catholic religious archive, which will strictly accept Catholic collections of men's and women's religious orders. We archivists look to our colleagues at academic Catholic archives to sound the alarm about the risks to our Catholic heritage and to consider accepting vulnerable collections. Many are consulting with colleges and universities, both Catholic and non-Catholic, to accept collections as outright donations or long-term loans. Academic institutions often have existing archival special collections and can offer professional oversight with existing staff. However, the sad reality is also that many Catholic academic archives are understaffed, underfunded, and under-resourced. Others are looking to museums and historical societies as other local options to consider. There are, though, a number of solid examples of charism-based repositories, including the Sisters of Mercy, which began to combine their archives in 2011, did not complete that until 2018. So again, that was about a seven-year process. The Jesuit Archives and Research Center in St. Louis, the Consolidated Archives of the Sisters of St. Joseph in Canada, among many others. These centralized archives are usually the result of a religious order with several provinces throughout the US and internationally combining their archives into one repository over a period of years. This has proven to be a successful model, especially for communities with long-term dedicated funding. However, the downside, as Tom got to earlier, is often that highly local or regional collections are transferred across the country, which limits physical access and connections to an important community the collection would otherwise serve. In short, there is no one-size-fits-all answer for this issue. So I want to address sustainability for a moment. In order for something to be environmentally sustainable, it often requires the three pillars of sustainability, which are environment, economy, and society. Let's apply a similar concept to archives. Archives require adequate space or consideration of a suitable environment, funds for long-term care or a sound economic model, and people to manage it and provide equitable access. And it's a working relationship. You have the archivists and the researchers. That's the society component. These are universal needs for all archives and certainly shared needs among Catholic, at-risk Catholic archives. Therefore, we might consider how collaborative sustainability is the answer. And as we look at this idea, there are several important points to consider as you think of a future for a Catholic archive. First, we must assess the current condition of the collection. Unlike academic archives, religious archives have often been managed by staff without traditional archives training. Former sister teachers, retired priests, or volunteers have done their best with little funding and resources to preserve long community histories. It's possible that collections have been stored in unideal conditions, and he's named a few this morning. You may have at-risk audiovisual material which requires digital reformatting. There may be confidential material in your collection that has not yet been earmarked as such. Do you have physical control of the collection? Do you have intellectual control? Do you know what there is and where to find it? Those are the basics. And part of the reality of the situation for women religious archives is that our membership for ACWR, roughly 70% of women religious archives are still being managed by sisters, and typically sisters in their 70s and 80s who are working part-time. So the amount of work that's necessary to bring collections even up to a basic standard is often too much for those archivists. It's a sad fact, too, that the labor of archivists is often invisible labor. Processing archival material and gaining physical and intellectual control over collections takes an incredible amount of time. The archivist rarely asks for assistance from other departments, but leadership, marketing, sponsored ministries, external researchers, and many others rely on the work of the archivist. Religious leadership, please support your archivist with adequate funding, opportunities for professional development, and show a genuine interest in the archives. Take seriously the complaints of lack of space, staff, and supplies. Consider, if you haven't already, hiring a professionally trained lay archivist to assist with readying collections for transition. The transition day will come. Sooner or later, it will come. Prepare a transition plan for your archivist and be realistic about the long-term needs and future of both the repository and the community as a whole. A second consideration for sustainable future for your archives has to do with accessibility, which we'll get into more this afternoon. But more specifically, asking the question, who are your future users? You may currently provide a lot of access to internal groups, right? We're very akin to a corporate archive, an institutional archive. They may be sisters, brothers, priests, diocesan staff, but future users will very much likely be scholars and the general public. Why do we preserve these records? We preserve them not to keep them locked away, but so that they can be used and shared by a wide audience. You should also consider, how will the archives be supported financially long-term? Charism-based repositories and collections donated to academic institutions have often included either an endowment or a fee to support collections. Can you afford an archivist to oversee the archive on a basic level? Are there funds to purchase archival supplies? Conservation work? Can you afford utility bills for HVAC needs? Can these costs be assumed by the successor repository? Again, with women religious, they are downsizing, they're selling properties. Their primary concern, as it should be, is the care of people. Of course, they care very much about their history and heritage, but at the end of the day, if it comes down to money, they will use that money to care for people. So it's important that you make long-term plans. Finally, I'm going to borrow a thought from a Dominican sister archivist who serves on the board of ACWR, Sister Mary, who quotes the musical Hamilton at every meeting. She prompts us to ask, who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Which is the title of the concluding song in Hamilton. It is vital that we build relationships with other Catholic congregations, academic institutions, cultural organizations, dioceses, because the question of sustainability will always come down to, who do you trust to care for your history, to share your records, to protect what's confidential, to carry the charism forward? Who will be your trusted collaborators? And as with all relationships, it takes incredible time and effort to build trust and to get it right. I'm happy to share that the Sisters of Charity of Seton Hill, for whom I work, are negotiating with Seton University, our sponsored ministry, to accept the archival collections of the sisters as a long-term loan. This transition will happen only when the congregation is ready. That may be when the archives needs to vacate the mother house, or when an administrative transition occurs, or if it becomes financially unviable to manage the collection anymore. The history of the Sisters of Charity of Seton Hill will not only be carried by the university, but will become an essential piece of academic life and mission integration. The collection will not be one of hundreds or thousands. It will be a highlight at home on the Hill. So I ask all of you here now, not just to open the door, but swing the gates open. Embrace the myriad possibilities for the future. Invest in new relationships. Look to old relationships. Encourage increased accessibility for your records. Take brave and strategic action to ensure a sustainable, dynamic path for your archival collections. Thank you.